Welcome to Torah Smash, the podcast for nerdy Jews, where our lives of Jewish learning collide with our love of nerd culture. In each episode, we discuss what we lovingly call a Torah Smash, which we have defined as a beautiful collision of one thing from the world of Judaism with another from nerd culture. I am Barak Malkin, and joining me today are...
Ethan Lane Miller.
RDY.
Terry Wunder.
Yay, our guest for today is Terry Wunder.
Yay.
Terry is the Director of Community Engagement at Temple Solel in San Diego, California, and also serves on the board of directors of JPro. He has been a Jewish professional for 17 years, supporting those looking for a place of belonging. He became a nerd when he saw X-Men, the animated series, in 1992. In episode 1, Terry saw someone like himself on TV for the first time, an Asian kid that had been in foster care, the mutant Jubilee.
Ba-na-na-na-na-na.
Terry loves watching Game Changer and TikToks of random Scandinavian chefs preparing meals while camping in the woods, and is an avid fan of hearing the weird details about his wife's current D&D campaigns, Miss Marvel's parents, and hot takes about how The Mandalorian is not a good show. He hopes to someday see the X-Men in the MCU. Welcome, Terry Wunder.
Yeah.
I've been here the whole time.
Dude, Game Changer is so good.
Yeah, I've been obsessed. We've been obsessively watching their Game Changer Survivor right now, and it's been our whole dinner table debates every night.
Oh, that's awesome.
You know, Game Changer comes up on my TikTok a lot, and every time I see a clip, I'm like, I need to know what this is. This is great.
That's what happened to us.
Yeah.
Wait, and you don't like The Mandalorian?
It's like I find it just so boring.
Is it? Can I ask you this? Do you like Westerns?
100%. I love Westerns. I love Deadwood. I like old Westerns. I like slow shows.
I view Mandalorian as just a really strong Western show.
I totally see that. I think the challenge is that I think not being able to see the Mandalorian's face just makes it like
Okay.
It might as well be a still for me.
Yeah. No worries.
But it's kind of weird.
It's not a judgment. It's just purely curious. I was just asking out of curiosity.
Yeah.
I'm also analyzing this as a former actor and like what level of acting it takes to be able to show emotion with no face, and how good Pedro Pascal is for that. Even as a relatively deadpan Mandalorian, he's still, you can see when they're surprised, you can see when they're, worried. It's pretty cool.
Well, I was talking to a friend about it who's blind, and he was like, "You just have terrible taste in all things." It's just like I don't see anybody's face, so maybe you should stop complaining about the Mandalorian. I was like, "Don't throw your disability at me." But it was totally right, totally valid.
Awesome. Super fun. Cool. So for today's episode, we're going to explore the newest addition to the Paul Rudd cinematic universe, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. So first, before we get started, since this is a movie Midrash episode, overall thoughts on the movie?
It was okay.
Yeah, I'm sort of on the same page.
I feel like I liked it more than anyone else in my friend group. And I know I'm a little bit of a chomper when it comes to Marvel movies, which chomper is a bit of a fish term, but the chomper is someone who likes anything new, no matter what.
And for your sister Susan, not the
animal,
the animal fish, the band. Yeah.
I felt like it wasn't an Ant-Man movie, and it also wasn't. It felt like a 2-hour trailer for another movie.
That
right for King War.
Yeah, that is such a great description. Like it just felt like, well, we need to pick a character to set up what's next, and they threw a dart, and it's like, all right, Ant-Man, Paul Rudd, you're setting it up.
However, if they're setting up Secret Wars, there's no better choice than Ant-Man leading into Kang.
I guess, but I'd rather it. I think the MCU is having this trouble recently where they are just creating stories to set up the next story as opposed to just telling a story.
So I have this like dichotomy of thoughts where one is the nervousness that they're going to be like the Wachowskis with the Matrix, where the first one was so good and they totally messed up the bed with the second one, and the third one got worse. But then again, there's the hope that it'll be more like where in the first part of the MCU, we didn't know what was going on. When the Avengers movie the first Avengers movie came out, there were characters that we didn't know that were being introduced that would be relevant later. There were ideas coming out that we didn't see again until Infinity Wars. So it's a little bit of patience that we're not used to, because the last movies of Phase 3 were so gratifying.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's true, except for that in Quantumania, the story that did exist within those 2 hours wasn't particularly interesting. I thought the story was like about him and his daughter, but like that story wasn't that compelling either, because this new Cassie, who is like a science fair genius, Cassie, is it's like, I think it was, a little overstuffed on all the things they had to fit in, which was such a bummer. In the same way that, watching Wakanda Forever, every time they throw it over to Julia Louis and Martin Freeman, we're like, wait, what about Wakanda? Similarly, that's how I felt. But yeah, I think one of the things that was super fun about it is that they still are really, Peyton Reed really does a good job of not trying to take himself too seriously. Like they can make fun of themselves, which I think is the delight, the quaintness of those movies.
Yeah. I agree with the daughter storyline. And I think for me, often what throws me for a movie is when the title doesn't match what the story is. And we've talked about this on other episodes for other movies we've discussed. For this, it's called Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. I don't think that Wasp had a huge role in this whatsoever to have the title card at all. It wasn't even, as you said, it didn't feel like the other Ant-Man movies, but even that, it didn't even have the Wasp as a major plot point in any of this whatsoever. They just kept her name on it to make sure that they had a female name with the male name, but then they didn't give her character much of anything to do. It felt like,
think there's just like too many characters in this part of this corner of the franchise now? Like we have to give Michael Douglas something, and also we're going to try to spend as much
Pfeiffer and Kang, and that could have been the problem. But there's been other movies that have I guess we're still sort of getting introduced to those, because we didn't know Michelle Pfeiffer in the previous one, so we had to get to know Michelle Pfeiffer, but we know everybody else except for Kang. So really just get to know Michelle Pfeiffer and Kang in this one, in which case, why is it called Ant-Man Quantumania? Should have been like titled with something with Kang, or the original Ant-Man and the Wasp. I don't know, something about the quantum realm as opposed to I don't know. I agree with you, but they've done it before with large casts. Guardians of the Galaxy, they did just fine with, and tons of new characters in that first one.
I found the ending particularly unsatisfying, and I'd love to chat about it a little bit, since the rumor mill is that it was reshot at the last minute and changed. It felt like it tied things up really too nicely, and I kind of was like, oh, they should actually keep Scott stuck there, like make him have a heroic sacrifice to like start out everything. And the rumor is it was kind of originally going to be that, and then executives kind of changed it at the last minute, and it didn't feel satisfying. Like for a while there, I really felt like they were leading towards he's going to be stuck there, and like what a big character development moment for him that he would sacrifice himself for his daughter, for humanity. And then they're like, oh nope, he got out, hooray.
Yeah.
When it was happening, when I was watching it, I remember thinking the same thing, and thinking that we were going to get a Young Avengers with Cassie Lang and all the stuff that she comes with. But
yeah,
I think one of the challenges is that they can't all be war movies. Like all of these Marvel movies right now are war movies, and that it dilutes a little bit of like the story, because you have to have a big giant battle war in it. Whereas in the first Ant-Man movie, the big battle was in a bedroom on a toy train.
Yeah.
That was so fun. I was with a bee, and was what was so great about it, is it like really leaned into the ridiculousness of, it's like when you find like the 5th or 6th different hat in Mario Odyssey, and you're like, oh my God, I'm this thing now, That's the kind of feeling I had. But this one was like, you could have replaced Ant-Man with any of the other characters in the MCU right now, and it could have functioned to introduce Kang in the same way. It wasn't so specific to Ant-Man.
Right. And it felt like
but that setting could have been on New Asgard,
I think you mentioned New Asgard because Loki is really the one who introduced Kang.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, I think that they tried to keep him because of his history with the quantum realm, but they threw in this heist in the third act of him trying to steal the core back. But it's not really a heist like the other two movies had a heist involved as this theft person. Like there's nothing special about his skills that helped him do that. And we'll get to a little more when we talk about the Smash, but otherwise, right, it didn't feel like an Ant-Man movie. It felt like he was written into a storyline for Kang.
Yeah, I was going to bring up the heist element too. I think you're right on, Barack.
Yeah.
Also, we've mentioned Yellow Jacket, but we have not yet mentioned MODOK.
Yeah. Well,
I was a little disappointed in MODOK. I was hoping for something a little different, to see that it was, Darren Cross inside, with the blown up head instead of, I don't know, anything else. It looked, I could have done without MODOK.
It looked insane.
Really excited to see it.
I thought you were going to say that the thing at the end that you had a problem with was when all the Kangs were talking to each other and they all looked like they're wearing costumes from Spencer's Gifts. Costuming was so jarring. It was like the little fair, like the little like I was like, what's happening here?
Oh man,
I felt was even more absurd.
That's very funny.
I was so excited to see the Council of Kangs that I didn't even pay attention to the costumes.
It's very fun. All right, well, let's move into, I think that's enough pre-chatter. Let's move on to the Smash. So for today's Torah Smash, I found a theme woven throughout this film that I want us to dive into the depths of the quantum realm with. Throughout the film, his daughter Cassie is telling him that it's great he wrote a book, but what has he done since the Avengers? And he pushes back that he fights for the little guy, always sort of hinting towards his book. And she asks, how? And there are other parts of the plot that will tie into this, but without diving into it too much, what do you think is the Smash for today? What is the Jewish connection?
Let your neighbor's justice be as important to you as your own neighbor's honor.
Nope.
Oh, that's good.
I'll say it's from Pirkei Avot is the
I love Pirkei Avot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of good stuff, I guess.
It's little digestible chunks of good learning.
Yeah. It's a popular quote. I would say that all of us on here have heard of this quote before. Again, and I'll even give you a little more hint in terms of Cassie's character, of who she is and her goals and what they seem to be when she's outside of the quantum realm, or even when she meets we'll call them the Micronauts, even though they're not the Micronauts. Did that help?
My guess would have been, it's not your responsibility to finish the work, but neither are you to desist from it.
You are spot on, Terry. Guest for the win.
Great.
Our guest host for the win.
I've always wanted to be Torah smashed.
Today we're going to look at the pretty popular quote from Pirkei Avot, which says, "It is not your duty to finish the work, but neither are you at liberty to neglect it," or desist from it, whichever translation you want to use. This text is used a lot when temples have a social action day or some other social justice program, partly because we know that whatever we're doing is such a small part of what needs to happen, and it's just a start, and there's nowhere we're going to finish. But it's a really nice reminder that it doesn't matter if you don't finish, but you at least have to get started. But we always only say the first line, so I'm going to read the quote in its entirety, and then RDY will likely correct me, and then we'll do a comparison of the full quote to Quantumania. So Rabbi Tarfon?
Usually we just say Tarfon.
Great.
The most Star Warsy sounding rabbi, I think.
Yeah.
You think he's a Jedi or a Sith? I'd say Jedi. Jedi Master Rabbi Tarfon.
He's a planet where we go to a barn.
I mean, so actually, there's a planet called Tython, I believe, which is a old Jedi temple.
Awesome. So
it's a temple.
So Jedi Temple Rabbi Tarfon used to say, "It is not your duty to finish the work, but neither are you at liberty to neglect it. If you have studied much Torah, you shall be given much reward. Faithful is your employer to pay you the reward of your labor. And I know that the grant of reward unto the righteous is in the age to come." And I'm going to break it down into the three sections. That's how we're going to explore Quantumania. So the biggest part of the quote is the first one. "It is not your duty to finish work, but neither are you at liberty to neglect it." And with Cassie being the newest in a long line of Marvel characters to be fighting against the displaced homeless due to the blip, she is who made me realize that this is a topic for today. And then I realized that the theme of just doing something, anything, was in most every character in this film. So starts off, where do you all see this theme of needing to do something come into play in Quantumania?
I mean, I think Cassie kind of embodied that a bit in this film.
Mm-hmm.
It just felt like she was the one who was like pushing Scott a bit to be involved, help people. I'm trying to think back. I think it was like the refugee camp scene where she was like pushing to try and help and be useful and was trying to be like, we have to try, we have to do something.
Yeah.
Drink the ooze.
Yes.
I like when they broke Cassie out of jail.
Yeah.
And Hank was like, I would have used ants, which he did.
Yeah, which he did originally, and then Scott did in the second one.
Mm-hmm.
This is the only movie that he didn't use ants to escape a jail.
They needed the joke.
Any movie that has rebels, this is kind of like the mantra of any rebel group. And especially when there are like younger rebels, seems to be like the message, just certainly true with Luke, and true here with Cassie. And so I think part of that is, I think it's like the Disney Marvel ploy here to like be talking to the kids that are watching this movie.
Right.
Like you are this character in this situation and you are the one who needs to continue the work of watching 75 more of these movies.
Well, who else? So I had a couple listed here, but do you are there other characters aside from Cassie that you recognize this just have to do something in their character in Quantumania?
I think, like has been said, all of these extra characters, the holes guy.
Yes.
The guy with the laser face.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I was so sad when he died. I was like, oh, we're not going to see him anymore. Just that idea. I'll even say, like, it's not just Cassie as the little kid, but even Hank and Janet are watching their little kids be the older kids.
Right.
And the real like clue there too is Scott Lang is always calling Cassie Peanut, but Janet calls Hope Jellybean. It's the same nickname.
Oh, I don't think I noticed that. I'll point out two others that I noticed that carry this theme. I'll say Janet, when Kang first arrives in the quantum realm and fixing the ship was impossible, whatever, but she helped him out and figured I just have to help him do something. His story sort of spoke to her. And that's why she stepped up and did what she could, but she didn't know if she could fix it. She just helped him, had to do something. And then I'll skip some of the other ones I had here, but I think in the final battle, Ant-Man spoke this theme out loud when he said that he doesn't have to win. They just both have to lose. Nice. So he didn't have to finish this job. He just had to make sure that Kang couldn't finish. So his doing something meant that this could happen, whether it's finished or not. Like Ant-Man doesn't have to win. He just has to do something.
I think it's hard to watch characters, and maybe this is like a Jewish values upbringing, that like really don't value this. Like the Bill Murray character, which which is just Jeff Goldblum in a different movie. Like is
Orlando Calrissian.
It's the same character basically.
Yeah,
like just not in a robe, but. Yeah. It's hard to watch a character like that who like clearly does not have that as part of their ethos. He's just like, yeah, well, it was just easier to go with Kang instead. He's fine with desisting. He's the desister.
Yeah. Well, I think that happens in a lot of movies when you find, right, this is why I chose this theme, that a lot of the other characters have this, we have to do something. And the villains often will show the opposite reflection of that. So the Bill Murray character was like, no, I don't have to do anything. I'm just going to go along with what other people are doing, and I'm not going to put any effort in. I'll just ride the wave.
Well, also the deal that Janet made with Krylar, that's the name of Bill Murray's character.
Thank you.
That was doing something underhandedly, but she was doing what she could do. Another note about Krylar, this is like super nerdy. You're welcome. I read the Incredible Hulk comic books as a kid. I loved the Incredible Hulk comic books, and I always felt like the only one who was really reading those. Krylar was a character from that series, and he was the ruler of the Microverse, which was the precursor to the quantum realm.
Gotcha. He'd been there a long time.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like that.
Yeah. The other one I'll just point out, as much as we weren't huge fans of MODOK, Darren Cross character, finally standing up for himself, and at the end, I think spoke to this, and dying, feeling like he was an Avenger because he wasn't a pawn anymore, right? Because he finally did something for himself. Yeah, I felt that his stand up at the end, really fighting against Kang, is what spoke to him doing something as opposed to being the instrument of death for Kang.
I think it's also the theme of the entire Ant-Man series, kind of beating us over the head with the little guy book.
Yeah.
But that idea that channeling Yoda, size doesn't matter, with a lot of shout outs to Star Wars 2, by the way. And
Star Wars 2.
Sorry.
The best one.
With a lot of shout outs to Star Wars also in this movie.
Mm.
Wait, was that Ethan? Was that your like depressive sigh of somebody mentioning Star Wars Episode 2?
No, was that episode 2 or was that The Empire Strikes Back?
I promise I will never reference episode 2 or 1 or 3 or 7, 8, 9.
So funny that like if somebody ever in accidental conversation just says like Star Wars also, but says 2, that you just have this like repressive Star Wars 2.
Yeah, you just say it out loud every time. It's like a
God
Pavlovian reaction.
Haunting me.
Someone texted one of my coworkers today. We're recording on May the 4th, and they go, "How many Star Wars jokes has Ethan made today?" The answer was surprisingly not as many. However, I did have a run-in with my CEO on our big staircase, and I was at the top, and I looked down at him, and I just looked, and I said, "You know what I have to do, right?" And he goes, "What, may the Force be with you?" I said, "No, it's over, Anakin. I have the high ground."
Awesome. All right, let's move on to the second part of the quote. It says, "If you have studied much Torah, you shall be given much reward. Faithful is your employer to pay you the reward of your labor." And I don't think that this has to do with Scott Lang's Baskin-Robbins Award. And I'll also say that I think depending on your definition of studying Torah is what will guide your thoughts on this section. I think this is talking about doing work and being given rewards in return. You know, study Torah, you're given a reward. You do your labor, your employer rewards you. So what do you think this plays out in the movie? What are the rewards that are given because somebody had done something?
Thank you, Spider-Man.
Yeah.
My God, I was transported just then. Accuracy. Incredible. Do you have the rights? Wow.
And I'll say, I don't think, right, just like the free coffee or the Baskin-Robbins reward, I don't think necessarily reward has to be like a physical gift. I think just getting something back from doing something else is what you could say reward is. So some instances where the characters received some sort of positive return on what they had done previously.
Well, I like the stuff in Marvel movies where the rewards come in the unexpected places. So I think in this movie, certainly MODOK is one of those things of like to have a whole storyline, like a DFG storyline where Darren Cross gets a little redemption in the end is so funny and unexpected, right? Certainly having MODOK at all, people were hyped. And then to have it actually have this tie back for the first movie and then he gets a little arc. That's the kind of fun that I just want more of that quirkiness.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good one.
Yeah.
He does also mention advanced idea mechanics, which is AIM.
Wait, he did in this one?
Mm-hmm.
I was like, keep an eye. I think maybe I ignored it because we had already seen AIM in Iron Man 3. That I was like, well, it can't be through AIM. Like, it's just got to be some other piece.
Or maybe that's just me importing what I know about Marvel Comics into the movie.
Maybe.
I rescind my comment just in case.
I'll throw out that I think the fact that Hank Pym and Scott and the whole family had sort of taken care for the ants previously, that they went off and created, I forget what kind of universe he had called it, but they went off and created their own like Techno universe and built their stuff. And then they came back at the end. And because they had taken such good care of the ants and the creatures, that the ants then came back in full force to support them in the final battle. I think that was sort of their...
And I think this comes back to some of what I was saying earlier, that like, I'm not sure anything in this movie really surprised me. Like the stuff with the ants, like I felt like that was foreshadowed really well. And I was disappointed when I wasn't surprised that Marvel was like, oh, we're going to save the heroes at the end. Like, I don't know. I think I was hoping this movie would go in, like, not to just crap all over what you're saying, Barack.
Yeah,
but like I felt like the ant thing, like it felt like it was predictable, for lack of a better
That
word.
wasn't a reward for you.
No, it was not.
Yeah.
I can think of 3 rewards now that we've been talking about it a little bit. One is, again, I'm going to go back to the holes guy because he got his holes in the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did enjoy Holes Guy. That's a weird quote. That's a real weird quote.
Yeah.
It's not that weird. It's fine.
And thank you, Terry. And another was perhaps Ant-Man himself for being just the kind of like salt of the earth criminal, but good person when it really counts. That his multi-Scots that came to help him during the heist scene that we talked about, maybe if he was on the fence of a good person or not always such a good person, they wouldn't all want to help. But because he's in general good to his core, all of the iterations of Scott Lang were helpful to him. And the other one, I think, is maybe more meta, but none of this would be possible if it weren't for the hard work that Hank Pym had been putting in since his work with Stark in the 1940s.
Sure.
So this is a work that's been going on for Hank Pym for a long time. A lot of study, a lot of research, a lot of hard work creating Pym particles, and all of anything that happens in the Ant-Man world is because of the work that he's put into it.
Yeah. Cool. All right, so let's move on to the the last part of this quote, which says, "And know that the grant of reward unto the righteous is in the age to come." And it's interesting that a movie dealing with the branching timelines that Loki introduces to is being paired with this quote about the age to come.
Yeah.
But personally, I think this is less about, again, as I said, less about a physical reward and more of an internal reward, like feeling whole, feeling complete in this one.
I also want to say that usually when we're reading the English of Atomic...
I knew you'd correct me. Go ahead.
No, this is not a correction. This is not a correction.
Okay.
This is a go, Barack, go.
Okay.
Usually when we're reading the English of the Talmud translation and we read something like in the age to come, our thought is that they're talking about Olam Haba, which is like the future world where everything will be perfect and the good people will get their rewards and, dogs and cats living together will be wonderful. And in this case, it's L'Atid Lavo, which is the future to come. So the age to come is a perfect translation here, that this is not about the next life. This is about our own future.
Oh, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I do think it's something the movie does well. We're talking about the age to come and we get all these kings meeting together.
Yeah.
But even I would have preferred an ending where Scott made that sacrifice. There was something great about his ending voiceover that I enjoyed.
Yeah.
Well, Iron Man got an ending voiceover without being alive.
No, I liked his internal turmoil, halfway through, and no, it's fine. Welcome back.
In the same way, it's like, did I leave the toaster on?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, exactly.
Probably not. It's fine.
Yeah,
yeah. I think that's exactly right, Ethan. Because it's just this whole as we were saying in the beginning, this whole thing was a preview a bit of what's to come, and so I just wanted more Kang at every point. Like the fact that he was gone for the 40 minutes in Act 1, I was bummed by that. So I think that's exactly right.
I had thought about the scene that RDY just talked about with the multiple Scots when they were trying to reach the core in this movie's so-called heist scene. It was endless indecision, and none of them could choose what to do, and they all sort of worked on their own trying to reach the core. But it wasn't until when Hope had arrived and grabbed his hand that they all sort of decided that this love for her was their goal. And that's when they worked together to force him up and create this character, so that it was her that made him feel whole in that sense. And that's why the multiple Scots were able to sort of unite as one. So I thought that was a nice one.
I feel so bummed by that only because 3 movies in, we know so little about Hope.
Yeah. Yeah,
and
totally
her in anything that's not relative to him, we don't really know about her. So that part, I kind of rolled my eyes from sunrise to sunset because I was like, well, we should know something maybe about this character that he's so in love with,
Yeah.
That's
I feel like they tried in this one, but not very much. In the second movie, she had a way more of a central arc, and we got a bit of it, but she's still in this one, she feels like the love interest, but just who's carried along in the storyline, who's also happens to be there. But yeah, it didn't feel great.
She had cooler stuff in Endgame.
Yeah.
Right. Totally. Going back to the rewards thing, one thing I was thinking that I didn't feel like we were rewarded by was that I was disappointed that Cassie's suit had nothing interesting comparatively to the other suits. Like each Ant-Man seems to have like a thing, like Paul Rudd can get small and big, and the Wasp has the wings and like these different, but Cassie's suit doesn't seem to have like anything that's distinctly her, you know? And I was like, oh, are we going to see something from her that's going to be like, oh, this is the Cassie Lang thing? And then
she has two. So for those who don't know, she has two characters that they could be turning her into. One is Stature, who's like the giant man version of Cassie's character. And the other one is Stinger, which is like the Wasp's version of Cassie's character. But she just felt like somebody learning the suit that didn't have the instruction manual, even though she was wearing it heading into here. Like, so she's got to have been playing around with it, right? As this person who built a mechanism to contact the quantum realm, she didn't find any of the hidden bells and whistles in her suit or create new bells and whistles for her suit.
that's
Right? Did she have stingers like the Wasp has on her wrist? I don't remember that at all. Like her power was her ability to like help others, right? Her showdown with MODOK was like, hey man, don't be such a D. Like just be good. And that was her weapon.
But she was also nervous, trying to get the timing of the punch and all that. I mean, I'm going to give her a break for this one.
I don't know. I think the fact that she was wearing her suit heading into the quantum realm tells me that she wears it in her off time and probably is practicing to be as amazing as her dad was, right? That she looks up to him as a person and her mom as a person, that she should have been practicing. Like it should have been more of a surprise instead of like, did you see what I did? She's like, no, I couldn't see. You were super small. Why does she must have been having the suit on, doing stuff with it. It felt like she's just wearing it to feel special, but she's not a person that I think would wear it to feel special. I think that she would be trying to figure out how to use it to help other people. And so I don't think she did that at all. It's a good point. I wasn't even thinking about that.
It's hard to judge her personhood, so to speak, because, you know, she had the trauma of losing her dad in the snap. So maybe wearing it as feeling like her dad's presence around her might be all she needed.
Generous.
Maybe.
So generous. So generous.
It's very fun.
My mind does the opposite thing. I'm like, you're terrible ant person.
Yeah.
I'm so hard to like this movie.
I'll say when I started watching it, I thought there was a different theme weaving throughout because they're constantly talking about looking out for the little guy. So I thought it was going to be this thing about not that you don't have to desist from the work and then you just have to do something, but that you have to make sure to keep an eye out for the smaller, the people who aren't able to stand up for themselves, right? That's where I thought this theme was going. But then at the end, there wasn't that payoff because he didn't care for the Micronauts. Like it really didn't feel like he had a care for them. If they just gave a shot where he's battling Kang and before he sacrifices the core, looks out and sees the Micronauts failing in their battle, they would have locked that theme in. But they didn't. It wasn't about the literal little guys. It wasn't about them. It was about Kang not succeeding. It was about him having to do something. And I wished it was the look out for the little guy. And what I think sold me into this is that when he went back at the end, the final closing scene, which should like wrap the theme up in a nice bow, was him going out to dinner to give his daughter a belated birthday dinner because he hasn't done that in a while, which isn't like, it's not looking out for the little guy. You're doing it for yourself to make you feel better. But what I'll say it ties to the other one is that at least he's doing something. He hasn't been there for the birthdays, so he can't do all of the birthdays. He wasn't there, but he's doing something. And that's sort of why I left the little guy theme alone and went with this one. But that was like frustrating for me.
What happens if we flip the script a little bit and think about what look out means? And maybe look out for the little guy doesn't mean take care of the smaller people, but look out, here comes Kang, who at the time is Micro.
Oh, that's they're like, we're creative fun writers. Double entendre.
I don't know. I'm always down for a good old fashioned
so hard
rebellion by the little people who've been oppressed. So I do think this was an area of the film that was teased and not always fully actualized.
Yeah, I sort of little bit love your double entendre flipping the script of like it's a Kang teaser, but it's Paul Rudd's Ant-Man like being all popular thing. It's a little funny. I enjoy it. It's a little funny.
Can we also just smash in the fact that Paul Rudd is Jewish?
Yes.
And as we learned on Between Two Ferns, he's not a practicing Jew because he perfected it.
The best. That's the
Great
best.
line.
Michael Douglas is Jewish. I
Michael
watched
Douglas.
him at a URJ biennial. That was super fun.
Yeah, I was there.
I was
I'm
a big
sure
fan.
some of the production staff are Jewish.
I will say I was more of a big fan at that one of Michael Douglas, more for Jewel of the Nile. That was where I really enjoyed him from, even from all this other stuff. Like that's was my favorite at the time. So I think we all agree that this was like meh. It was meh. Like even when I tried to find stuff, I still couldn't find great themes. So let's jump out of the theme to close out, and let's just. What other things did you notice that were super interesting in this one? I'll give you one in this meh film, is that at the beginning, when Kang landed, when he landed next to Janet, he was sort of exiled because they were worried about him, maybe because he was fighting against the other Kangs in perhaps a good way, maybe because when they build his ship, the color of the power is orange. And towards the end of the movie, as he gains power to this evil, it's blue. And it's just very similar. If there is some connection to Shang-Chi's 10 Rings, where when the dad has it, they're blue. And when the mom or Shang-Chi has it, it's orange. That the good side of it changes the color from that perspective. Like if it's a mood ring in some way, somehow. That like when they put it back in the ship, the core was orange. Maybe because Janet was working on it. Maybe that's where the color was coming from. But his blue power, the portals at the beginning were orange, the portals to the ends were blue, his power is blue. There could be something that they're tying in here with this evil good dichotomy and not going with like Disney's purple or green, that maybe they're doing a blue thing. But I noticed that one. I wanted to point that out.
This is the level of specificity that I came here for.
Yeah.
Welcome to Torah Smash.
I think this could, also with Victor Timely, like with him at the very end of the movie, and we assume he's going to be a big part of Loki too, that, what was the fall of Victor Timely and the creation of Kang?
Well, I don't know the timeline order that they are going to run with here. If we're ever going to get to his descendant of Reed Richards history, or if we're just going to start at Ramatut or start with the future one that goes back to, I don't know. It's too complicated, overlapping situations. I think they're just going to sort of wave it off and say exposition and we're done with it. And then we'll, right? So I don't know how many versions of what we're going to get. I do think Secret Wars is going to play out very differently than either of the comic versions.
Mm-hmm.
I think Secret Wars will be like the internal good versus evil fighting. And I think the Kang War will be some sort of like team power-ups with the good Kangs and the bad Kangs or something. If it's a Kang War, it's not just us against Kang, it's Kang against Kang. Mm-hmm. And so we'll have to figure out who's going to go rebellious against the other ones, which characters they're going to flip the script on for the movie version so that people are still surprised who read the original Kang War issues. So that's my guess. Terry, do you have any like comic book background on this stuff, or you're all MCU based?
All my comic book background is really in X-Men.
Okay.
So this is all just, the longest preamble ever until
you get to see some.
Yeah. So you're just like, you keep waiting, you get these little teases here and there, and
you get a little in WandaVision, a little in Miss Marvel, you get a word in Miss Marvel, like this. Every time my wife is like, ugh, she's pointing at me like,
you got a sound cue and a character in Doctor Strange.
Yeah, that was wild stuff. That blew my mind.
Fantastic.
But I'm honestly, I talked about this with my wife too. Of like, I almost wish they wouldn't join. So I wouldn't have to carry all this baggage of all the continuity and all the stuff. I wish it kind of existed again on its own in some other way.
Yeah.
So Deadpool, is that gonna be what pulls in the mutants?
Yeah, he's gonna sit down at a computer and drag the file X-Men universe and drag it over into the MCU universe.
God.
And that's how Deadpool's gonna bring them in.
The problem is
right now
that could absolutely be it. It could literally be Ryan Reynolds at 100%. A computer.
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's going to come in all drips and drabs, and then it will just, they'll unfurl it all at once. But in any way that it comes, it's going to be.
Well, it's interesting because in the X-Men animated series, I'm going to jump off into Terry world right now, is that the animated series Jubilee was not a major character in the comics prior to, and they elevated Jubilee to be the eyes through which we saw, right? The new character to this universe and the person who's understanding and learning everything. The X-Men series, we started off as Jubilee as our entry point, and she was not popular outside of the animated. They tried. They threw her in background characters in the X-Men movies.
Oh, so sad.
And then they even
casted like Lana Condor as her once, who is great in stuff. And
they started heading that direction, and they were like, I don't know if we're doing this right, and then just gave up. But I'm sure she'll come back with the new X-Men 97 show.
Cannot wait for that.
Yeah.
Here's hoping.
And the series, X-Men generally, that brings the kind of diversity that we now in 2023 crave. I think it's going to be a good time in 24 and 5 and 6 and whatever it actually happens to have it done in a way that feels inclusive in the way we all, would hope it to happen.
Yeah.
So whatever, it's all a net positive for me at this point.
Cool. Nice. Great. Anything else on Ant-Man? Happy or sad about? I missed Luis, Michael Pena's character.
Yes.
100%.
Yeah. I hope that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I hope that there is a fourth.
Wow.
Oh, Ant-Man?
Yeah.
To fix this?
No, because I don't want to frame it as fixing things, but so that there can be a final Ant-Man that touches the story beats in the way I want to see it,
Yeah.
Like, let this film be what it is. Like, I don't want to be revisionist in the way that The Rise of Skywalker really screwed up The Last Jedi, in my opinion. But I'd love to have a fourth, so there's another crack at it.
You know what? I was just thinking of this as you were chatting. A great way. It wouldn't have worked because the Ants timeline was way different. But if they had Michael Pena sucked in also, and he was with the ants the whole time, if Michael Pena
then he could have narrated what the ants had done.
Narration of what they had done.
Yes, that's so good.
That would have been a way better background exposition of what happened to the ants.
I love that.
Although it was like thousands and thousands and thousands of years, so he would not have lived. So I don't know how they could have rectified that.
They could have like downloaded his brain or something. Like you could,
oh yeah.
Give me an hour in a writer's room, we would have figured out a way.
Yeah.
Well, if they do a fourth, I hope they go back to it being a genre movie, because I think
I agree.
A lot of them is such a strength when it's a genre.
I agree.
Yeah.
Sure. So to wrap us up, at the end of the movie, the last line of Scott Lang's closing narration says, "Stop overthinking it. Sometimes, in order for us to make a difference on this tiny blue planet, we just have to do. And life can be a roller coaster where you're fired from Baskin-Robbins one day, and the next you're beating a time-traveling space king." They did beat him, right? He was getting out, and he didn't get out, I think. But he also said something bad was coming. So is everyone going to die because of Ant-Man? Oh my gosh, what did he do? You know what? It's probably fine. Life goes on, but we can't just sit back and expect everything to happen for us. So roll up your sleeves, stop asking so many questions, and just get started.
So good.
Cool. Well, Terry, I am so excited that you joined us here today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
So fun.
Is there anything that you'd like to give a shout out to or plug in perpetuity?
Yeah, I just want to give a plug for the people that didn't know Barack 10 years ago. He was just one of the best young youth advisor people in California, and everybody looked up to him for being so awesome. And it was like a joy to work with you then. And I'm glad that we've kept in touch for so long and that we get to do this now. And seeing you, now nerd parent, even cooler. So kudos to you. That my shout out is to you. Nothing to plug except for thank you for having me.
Well, do you want to plug your podcast?
Sure. I work at Temple Solel. We have a podcast called Quest for the Questions, where Rabbi Alexis Burke and I examine the myths and mysteries of Judaism through the lens of me, who knows nothing, and her, who knows lots. And so if you're interested in trying to unfurl the unknown, you can look up Quest for the Questions on anywhere you can find podcasts.
Nice. I've enjoyed it. I've gotten notes for future episodes for this from your discussion, so I'm enjoying it.
That'll be $12.
That'll do it for this episode of Torah Smash. Our fiscal sponsor is Jewish Creativity International. Our theme music was created by Sean Fogel. You can check out Sean's bands and studio work at www.thesleepywest.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to rate and review us wherever you listen. It helps others find us and is an excellent way to support the podcast. We want to hear from you and continue today's nerdy discussion. Go to torahsmash.com to find where to connect with us online, purchase swag from our store, support us with a donation, find previous episodes, and more. And we do this because people need us to be Torah Smash. Question: is it too late to change the name?
This is the fundamental difference of Brock and I working together when we work together. Me being like, let's burn this down. Brock being like, well, don't you think that they meant to be good?